information.
Always.
Every day. Good to be here. I always love to read in Healdsburg, and I've never read in this wonderful place before. You know, I used to read in the senior center, and then a really official building over in the main
City Hall.
the City Hall. And anyway, it's good to be here. And I want to start out, I've been reading some Dante lately and commentaries on Dante. And I want to start with a quote, a small paragraph from a book by a woman named Harriet Rubin called Dante in Love. And it's kind of a feminist, mystical interpretation of Dante, and it really moved me. And, quote, nature in the 13th century was not a separate category of thought. It was God's writing. If you knew the sequence of letters and words in God's style, you could write the word rose, and a rose would bud before you. It sounds outlandish, but this is essentially what genomic scientists now believe. A bit over the top, but I like over the top. I guess this kind of was a World War I expression, you get over the top, enemy lines. But I've always wondered, you know, I had this editor once who said, everything I was writing was over the top. And I thought, well, the top, no, it wasn't the top. If I ever find the top, or find myself there, I'm damn sure gonna climb over it. I have no patience with the kind of realism that isn't at least a little bit over the top. And what I'm going to read doesn't have much to do with that, but I have written this prose poem. It's called Old Dog Blues, and it's from the perspective of an old dog, who's obviously not me. But in an attempt to get away from the lyric first person, of course I don't. But it is in the, you know, it is in the third person. I mean, it isn't about me, and it is. But I call it a ramble, because it's neither poetry nor prose. It's kind of a mix of each. The sounds, the first lines of these little sections are kind of like titles. The sounds of his small town save him. Is this the way one finally fades out, he asked himself. On this, the lowest in a month of low days, spirit finding less and less to cling to, trapped by the walls at the end of this box canyon called old age. He sits on the porch and closes his eyes, breathing deeply, ears opening to the air, children playing at the creek, two cyclists talking on the road below, their words flying by, coming and going, whisper of breeze, sigh of the earth cooling after a hot day, and the deep, playfully serious voice of a man 2 houses over. Come on, Thelma, you can have anything you want. Just name it. He howls at the moon sometimes, but he doesn't know why. It's just there to howl at, and he always has. What else do you do with a moon? That loner poet who lives up on the hill he's known as doesn't mix a lot with people. Walks down to the P.O. in the morning, a ramble up the road later on, then back to his bones. His securely stashed bones. When he feels a thirst coming on, he heads down the highway to the Blue, where he checks out the scene, has an Irish whiskey and a brew, and hightails it back home by a back road where it's safe enough to puff some herb on the way, back to his tiny comfort zone before the world calls him further. It's dangerous out there. Old dog feeds his cats first thing in the morning. Sweet breeze, silver bell, and little bit, all present and accounted for. And those 2 ferals, Raggedy Red and Leopard, waiting under the truck for leftovers. He'd chase them away, but they are hungry and it keeps them from killing so many birds. He turns on the radio, makes coffee and toast, and listens to the news until he can't stand it anymore. Turns off the radio and puts on some blues. There are people out there he wants to bite. When he sees Sweet Breeze stalking a bird, he barks. His cat looks up as if he had slapped him. Old guard dog smoking herb and drinking coffee on the porch, listening to Miles Davis. Why does Kind of Blue make him feel happy? Surrounded by his cats and flying with Miles, he seems happy, and he supposes he is. As happy as an old, broke, half-crippled pothead poet has a right to be. And when the last notes of the song play out, the birds begin, as if in response. A scatter of chirrs and whistles, mockingbird on fire with morning song, that many-tongued mimic getting carried away somewhere in the canopy of oak and bay. Wispy white feather caught in a strand of web in the corner seems to be floating. Hello, Scrub Jay, come down to get the kibbles, he says aloud, softly. You're not as shrill as the other jays. I love your white eyebrows. You look like a girl bird, and you are welcome here on my porch. The cats are hiding, there's plenty of kibble. What appears to be a new hatched dragonfly levitates slowly across the floor, carried by a tiny invisible ant directly toward his chair. He steps carefully when he gets up to answer the phone. Unable to meet the gorgeous chaos head-on, old dog holds up, hides out, though he likes to be of use and finds a way occasionally to be good for something. He's obsolete for sure. Old dog's not wired in. His paws have never touched a keyboard. Old dog walks with a painful gimp, but he still can dance, and does when he feels the music. His imaginary partner moving with him. The muse is his woman, though she's not always around. She has many lovers, and he's learned to court her like those troubadour poets courted their fair ladies. Occasionally she floats him a scarf from her high window impregnated with her scent, and once in a rare while she surprises him with a knock on his door. Full moon rising, a gang of children walking by on the street below begin to howl, hoot, screech, squeal, and growl. Children uphill playing in a yard, beasts call back. A parent warns them not to disturb the neighbors. A man laughs and they continue, answering calls from down on the street, overlapped by a man's shrill cry at a wolf owl. Two women laugh and coyote yips from somewhere towards town. A cascade of cat calls answers. Old dog sitting alone in front of his cabin in the cul-de-sac thrills to the calls that come even louder from the children downhill, their numbers increasing as they mosey along, moved by the sound of his neighborhood coming alive. He's not surprised when what sounds like a real wolf call comes from another direction, somewhere to the north, followed by those redneck hounds barking southeast of town. The children uphill bark even louder, and the children downhill howl back, and a woman's full alto interrupts the chaos. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Old dog feels a thrilling chill in his shoulders. Children call back from several directions, one boy singing the scale down. Do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Several men's voices laughing, hooting, and shouting, and then the woman's beautiful alto rising above as if bursting from the moon. Old dog, helpless before the urge, throws back his head and releases three long bottomless cries that silence everything else for a moment. Then wolf howls seem to rise from every direction. Somewhere to the north someone in the north begins to chant. The woman follows. Old dog clears his throat, joins in. The beast calls from the sidewalk begin to fade, silenced by the chanting from four directions now. 4 voices rising and falling hypnotically. A man's voice near the woman's droning a deep bass. The man to the north wailing an eerie falsetto. Old dog finding his tenor baritone range behind the cascading minor notes of the woman. Then just the 2 of them, making almost music together. Sounds rising up from his belly he didn't know were in him until they stop. She stops. The silence is abrupt, heartbreaking. Little bit has gone missing and old dog is worried. He knows she crosses the road sometimes and the cars come around that curve fast. But she was here before he came and will be when he's gone, he tells himself, like everything else. He celebrates his ex-wife's birthday and tries not to remember, then gets drunk. Old dog wonders if he's too old to play the game of man and woman again. He knows he's had his day, but wonders where it all went and why, and if it's really over. Why, in his age, with his longing and lust and love as strong as it's ever been, maybe his transgressions against women have been so numerous he won't be allowed another in his lifetime. Maybe he's angered the goddess. Oh, come off it, dog. You're an old guy with a gimp. He sits by his fire and weeps for the world this rainy night. Tears everywhere, inside and out, all over creation. When the fire begins to fade, he lies down and says his prayer. Elemental old dog's prayer. Praise the gods for this bed and a roof over my head. Old dog dreams he is dead, but there was no end to music and desire. Despite the fact that he was no longer sucking wind, there was no end. That he could no longer open his mouth and send a sound out into air or hold a woman in his arms, entering her sacred fleshly spaces, was simply due to the fact, as the Buddhists would say, that the conditions were no longer sufficient for this to manifest. Old dog takes a long draw on his pipe and worries about Little Bit. She hasn't come back and it's been 4 days. Despite his comfortable morning by the fire, a leisurely breakfast, the angelic flights of Segovia's guitar, and a phone call from a woman he loves, he is anxious.